Alright, there was a lot happening in that documentary clip, but never fear, we're going to unpack it, we're going to work through it. We're going to begin back at the end of the 19th century. There had been Jewish communities in Europe since the Middle Ages. True, they had been mistreated for centuries. They had been hounded into ghettos, the first being in Venice. The word ghetto actually comes from the word for Venetian ment, and the first area of confined Jewish settlement in Venice was around the area of the ment. Thus the term ghetto entered the language. There had been outbreaks of violence against Jewish communities from time to time, especially in the week before Easter, Holy Week, but there had been a measure of accommodation. This began to change in the late 19th century, especially in Eastern Europe, where pogroms, large, massive outbursts of violence against Jewish communities were becoming increasingly common. And it's in this world that an Austrian Jew named Theodor Herzl begins to talk about Zionism, or the idea of refounding a Jewish state somewhere in the world. And in 1896, Theodor Herzl will pen an essay entitled Die Judenstaat, or the Jewish State. In it he writes, "What matters a driving force? What is that force? The distress of the Jews. Who dares deny that this force exists? We understand steam power, which is generated by boiling water in a tea kettle, and which then lifts the kettle lid. Such a tea kettle phenomenon are the Zionist experiments and many other organized efforts to combat anti-Semitism. This force, if properly used, is powerful enough to run a great machine and transport men and merchandise. I am profoundly convinced that I am right. I do not know whether I shall be proved right in my lifetime. Yet what I am saying not yet true? Am I ahead of my time? Are the sufferings of the Jews still not great enough? We shall see. The year is 1896. There's an increasingly large number of Jews who are moving to Palestine. If we look at a map of the Mediterranean in 1914, we see in green here, stretching from Istanbul down the coast of the Red Sea and down through what is today Iraq and into Kuwait, is the Ottoman Empire. It had once stretched all the way across North Africa and into what is today Iran, but had continually shrunk since the 17th century to its size here at the outbreak of World War I. We can see that in what is today Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. The French have set up a colony. What is today Libya. The Italians had had their colonial adventure a few years earlier. And in what is today the Sudan and Egypt, the British had essentially established a de facto colony since the late 19th century. During the coming World War, England and France, and then eventually Italy, would be fighting on one side, and the Ottoman Empire would decide to ally itself with Germany, Austria-Hungary, therefore on what would eventually be the losing side in World War I. If we jump ahead to 1922, the map looks very different. What had been the Ottoman Empire has now shrunk to what is today the state of Turkey, the Anatolian Peninsula, and Istanbul. What is today Iraq is under British control. What is today Syria is under French control. What is today Jordan, the state of Israel, is also under British control, as well as the Hijaz, the area of Mecca and Medina, and what is today Saudi Arabia. So how did we get from 1914 to 1922? Well, let's take a step back and see. In 1916, the foreign ministers of France and England, Mr. Sykes and a Monsieur Picot, came to a secret agreement, an agreement to divide what is today Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel between themselves, with the French ruling what is today Lebanon, an Arab state under French protection in what is today Syria, an Arab state under British protection there in pink, in what is today Jordan, southern Israel, and Iraq, and then in purple, an area under the protection of Great Britain, France, and Russia, what is today essentially the main inhabited part of Israel, the West Bank. This secret agreement, though, would not be the last say in what's going to happen here in the land of Palestine, because 1 year later, Lord Balfour made a declaration known creatively as the Balfour Declaration, Lord Balfour of England. He stated, quote, "His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine." That is a crucial clause. This declaration by Lord Balfour was made to the Baron Rothschild. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, but so long as it does not prejudice civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. That is the problem to the present day. In 1920, the great victorious powers of World War I met in the lovely Italian Riviera city of San Remo to discuss further what would happen here in the former territories of the Ottoman Empire. It was decided that what is today Jordan, part of western Iraq, and what is today Israel would be combined into a single mandate that would be governed by the British. The British Mandate of Palestine. However, in 1922, it's proposed that this mandate be split along the line created by the Jordan River. To quote the British authorities, the principal Allied powers have also agreed that the mandatory should be responsible for putting into effect the Balfour Declaration in favor of the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, it being clearly understood that nothing should be done which might prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. They have plagiarized the Balfour Declaration. Recognition has thereby been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home in that country. Things are happening now. Things at high political levels. What had begun as an idea in the late 19th century had been encouraged by immigration, by tens of thousands of Ashkenazi Jews, that is, Jews from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Russia, moving into Palestine. And here we have, in the aftermath of World War I, the League of Nations, established via the Treaty of Versailles, giving to Great Britain mandatory power. It's a kind of tutor to a people who have not ruled themselves, in a very paternalistic 19th century model of helping a benighted people come to civilization, eventually the idea being that the mandate would end and the people would govern themselves.